Well, good morning to Facebook Live. We want to welcome you this morning. We have lots of people watching from all across Canada and around the world right now, which is really good and really awesome. We thank you for checking in on us. We hope that this morning you'll enjoy what you've been experiencing and it will speak into your life a little bit. And we are also so thankful that we are able to broadcast into Exeter this morning as well. We are so excited. The team has worked so hard to make sure that it happened today for you. And so we are excited. So I hope that you're cheering at this moment in Exeter as we are broadcasting live into your area, which is really exciting. We're a church that loves to explore, walk with people who are exploring faith. That's how we're designed as a church, is that we want to come alongside of people who have got questions. We want to walk with people who've got doubts about faith and church and God. And so I really love that part of who we are as a church. And if that's you, then we're so thrilled that you're part of this morning, whether you're in the room here live in Exeter or online watching. We also love walking with people as they grow in their faith, because I believe that part of our journey is also how do we develop the root systems? How do we develop a strength in our faith that can become resilient, that can become strong? And so we love seeing that happen as well in the context of our church. So just to kind of give you a picture of what we're about. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever planned the perfect day? You have it all planned out just right, and then something happens. Interrupts your day. Anyone have that? Just checking to see if you're still with me. How many of you ever planned like a perfect vacation and it's like just down to the T, and then something interrupts it and it changes everything? Anyone else have that happen? Yeah, some of you are lying. It's okay. Monday morning, I had the perfect day planned. I was getting to the office and I was prepared to study and write and talk about the resilient life. I even had a fantastic opening illustration from a Rocky movie. I thought I was going to use a Rocky movie this morning. I had my Bible out, I had my iPad open, I was getting ready to write, and I noticed the plow truck driver showing up in our office. And I thought he hit my car, to be honest with you. And I thought, okay, here we go. And as I opened the door and he walked into our space in our London office, he said words that I will never forget. They were very slow and methodical as they came to my ears. Your trailer was stolen last night. Everything's gone. Don't worry, I called the police. Okay. Now, what you need to know about Vital Point Church, if you're newer to Vital Point Church, we're referred to as what is called portable church. What's interesting about that is that everything that we use on a Sunday morning, whether it's here in London or in Exeter, is all stored in a trailer. And now more thieves know about our trailers, which is great. Everything. Every piece of carpet that a child sits on, every name tag, every iPad, MacBook, every piece of sound gear, panel walls for kids, everything is stored in that trailer. And you got to imagine what was going through my mind in that moment. I would have actually preferred that he hit my car, to be honest with you. He could have totaled it for all I cared. In this moment, I realized that this is an interruption. I quickly called my wife first to let her know. I called one of our truck drivers who pulls our trailers to make sure that he didn't take it home. I thought, by luck, he may have taken it home with him. He's like, no, Ron, I didn't. And I realized in this moment that all of our gear is gone. What do you do? How do you approach this? After a few hours of my heart racing, literally my heart was racing for a little bit, I realized that we needed to get a plan in motion. We need to kick into gear like we do. Because at Vital Point Church, we don't let too many things get us down. We don't let too many things get in our way. We dig down deep and we move forward. We dig deep within ourselves and as a community, and it began to happen. Monday night, 10 people showed up at our office, a mixture of staff and volunteers, coming up with a plan and a strategy to make sure today would happen. That was first and foremost. That we figured out we got to get together to make this plan come to be. What happened next really surprised me in a way that maybe it shouldn't. But an overwhelming number of people from our church and from outside of our church, people who are church, people who are unchurched, began sending messages, text messages, and reaching out to see what they could do. Monday evening around dinner time, the pastor from Gateway, just over here around the corner from us, Pastor Rick Boyce showed up at my house to see if I was okay, to check that I wasn't in the fetal position in my living room. We spent some time just reflecting together on what had happened. He wanted to know the story. And I said, we're going to get through this. We're going to be great. We're going to be fine. We're going to rise above it. And little did I know in that moment, he was going to bless Vital Point with a substantial financial gift to help us get through this season that we're facing right now. Absolutely. I was completely shocked. It was amazing. You want to talk about the unity of the church in northwest corner of London? It was incredible in this moment. I was amazed. Other things began to happen, other things kick in motion, and we find ourselves here today, gathered in this space, going, what can we learn from this? See, I think it's super important to understand something about this moment for us. This is not a tragedy. It really isn't. Yes, we had some of our equipment stolen, some of our gear is gone. Actually, all of our gear is gone, not some of it, all of it is gone. We did get our trailer back. If you're interested in hearing the story, I was actually a witness to getting our trailer back. I would love to share that story with you because now I think I've missed my calling as a private investigator. Yeah, see, some of you are like, yeah, you should go do that. No, thank you. I'll give you $20 each later for saying that, guys. I saw it all go down, me and a guy from the church here. We got tipped off to it. It was in Strathroy. It was awesome to see the police take this guy down. It was awesome. They didn't literally take him down. They just said, put your hands on the truck. But anyway. So I can't even remember where I am in this whole thing. I had this whole plan planned out so nicely. Oh, I know what it was. Here's the thing. It's really a setback. It's an interruption. That's really all this is. I think Kath hit it on the head. For those of you watching online in Exeter, Kath prayed this morning for us in this world that we live in. And there's some things that are happening in our world that are so tragic. With the fires in Australia, the plane being shot down, just the tragedy of other things that are going on in this world. And I even look at behind the scenes of people that fill out our little prayer card on our website, seeking prayer, because we have a full prayer team that works behind the scenes praying for people. And I see those things, and I look at those moments, and I look at those things that people are facing. I think those are the things that are tragedies that we need to lean in and pray for. Some of them are in your own life. Some of them right now you are facing. And in comparison, this is not really that big of a deal. But as I reflected on that this week and as I began thinking about that, I realized that even though this is not a tragedy, it is an interruption into our regular routine, it is something that we need to learn from. It's something that we as a church need to realize that there's something else that is going on in the midst of this that maybe we should step back and take a look at for a moment. Because I am learning some things about who we are as a church. I'm watching and paying attention to what it is that is happening in this moment to realize there's something beautiful that is happening in the midst of this setback, in the midst of this interruption. See, because I'm beginning to understand something clearly about life, is that oftentimes it is the interruptions in our lives that allow us to become resilient. It is these moments, these setbacks, these things that come into our lives, some are big, some are small, that they are the things that develop the resilience in our lives. Resilience is not a one-time thing. It is the accumulation of the setbacks and the interruptions and the pain and the struggles and the difficulties that allow us to move forward. Resilience is this idea of bouncing back, but I'm convinced that when we face these things in our lives, it's not about simply just bouncing back, it's about becoming stronger, becoming more resilient. Not only in our minds and our hearts, but just in the regular aspect of how we face life and face each new situation. See, one of the things that has struck me about what is happening in this moment, in our particular situation, our particular story, that's become a real life illustration on resilience, is that when we have interruptions, we must step back and look at the big picture. And I think that funny enough and oddly enough, that was actually the topic for today, was the big picture. And I think that that's something that the Bible teaches us. Actually, I know that the Bible teaches us that we are to, in our moment of interruption, we are to see that there is something else going on that's bigger than what we see and can understand at times. I was thinking about this moment in the Bible around this personality in the Bible's life named Paul. We often refer to him as the Apostle Paul. And I had actually intended on talking about this moment in his life prior to this thing happening to us. But it's this moment where I think the Apostle Paul gives us a demonstration of what it means to look at life and be resilient from a big picture. Paul's life is a very fascinating life. You can maybe break it down into a number of parts and strategically into two parts. First part is his passion to protect the name of God in a way that was a bit misguided and misunderstood. And then Paul has this incredible moment where he comes to Jesus on what is called the road to Damascus, where he has this Jesus moment and his life is redirected and understanding how his life was to advance the work of God in this world. And we get to look at Paul's life because it's captured for us in what is called the New Testament. And we actually can read some of his writings. And we can get a perspective on faith and God and understanding big picture from his life. It's a fascinating thing to realize that even we here today, meeting in this room right now and watching online or meeting in Exeter, that we are here as a result of this guy named the Apostle Paul, because God used him to open up the message of good news of who Jesus is to the Gentiles through the Apostle Paul. It wasn't just to the Jewish community, now it's to the Gentiles. And so this door opened up, and God used him to advance his kingdom in this world by starting churches and developing leadership programs and mentoring systems. And we see the advancement. But in the midst of this, we also realize that there was opposition to the things that Paul was doing. There's this moment in Paul's life in Acts chapter 16 where he was taking care of some things that God had arranged for him to take care of, which drew some attention, some negative attention in his life. And we see this moment, and he's got this co-worker named Silas that was going with him. And they end up in this situation that's so dire, so I would imagine interrupted their plan for the day that they didn't expect it. Let me read it for you to help you hear what was going on in this moment. Imagine Paul and Silas are going about doing their business, a regular day is planned, and then it's interrupted. It says this: a mob quickly formed against Paul and Silas, and the city officials ordered them stripped and beaten with wooden rods. Kind of a bad day. They were severely beaten, and then they were thrown into prison. The jailer was ordered to make sure they didn't escape. So the jailer put them into the inner dungeon and clamped their feet in the stocks. I mean, this is like a bad moment, right? This is like, man, I did not plan for this to happen. This is something that took place in their lives, and they're stripped naked, and they're beaten, and they're thrown into jail. See, sometimes the interruptions feel like that at times, don't they? It's you go into work on Monday morning and you feel like the week ahead of you, and then they walk you out 5 minutes later saying you're done. Or the phone call comes in and tells you that the news isn't good, or your daughter calls you and tells you that her marriage is done, or a good friend that you thought was a good friend that you could trust is gossiping behind your back, and you're devastated by this moment. It feels like you've been stripped naked and beaten. Children face these things too. I don't think it's just an adult sitch. I think it also has to do with sometimes children face this when they go to school and they walk the halls and they're terrified because of bullying. They work hard to make a competitive sports team and it doesn't work out for them. See, we don't plan for these things to happen. They just happen. Interruptions come. Paul and Silas are going along their way, and all of a sudden, they find themselves in a predicament. They find themselves deep in a dungeon, chained to one another and in shackles. Now, when we face these interruptions, what do we do? How do we respond? Like, we look at these moments and we kind of go, I don't know what to do in this moment. Paul and Silas give us an example of what it means to live a big picture of this moment. Look at verse 25. It says, around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening. Two things happen. Is my mic going in and out, Mark? Yeah. Can we fix this? It's just a little bit. It's distracting me, though, worse than it normally does. Bird, squirrel. Do we have a hand mic? Mark, can we get a hand mic to Is it okay? You guys okay? I'm glad you're okay. It's not bothering you? Okay, it's just me then. Yeah, I'm the one with the issue. You're resilient. Ushers. Charlene. Two things happen. Pray and praise. Two things. Pray and praise. And you're like, okay, pray. Let's talk about that for a second. Like, okay, yeah, I get it. But what do you pray for? See, sometimes when we face these interruptions in life and we have these moments that happen to us, we often will go into it with often a victim mindset. God, I don't know why this is happening. Why are you letting this happen to me? You got to take this away. Come rescue me. Get me out of this. Why? And I don't believe that that's what Paul is doing and Silas are doing in this moment. I think what they're doing in this moment is that they're posturing themselves in a way of surrendering to the will and to the plan of God in this moment. I don't know if they're necessarily praying that God gets them out of this. They're actually looking at it from the lens of God. You see the big picture here. God, I'm going to trust you. You see the front of the puzzle box. I don't, and I'm going to allow you to use this moment as a piece of the puzzle that brings about a greater picture of what you're trying to accomplish in this moment. See, I believe that that's what the prayer moment is doing for Paul and Silas. They paused and they prayed. Tuesday morning, I get a Facebook message from a friend of mine who lives in a different city. And he expressed to me his brokenness over what had happened to us in losing our gear and our trailer. He said, in the message, he said, Ron, I want you to share with me what God is telling you in the midst of this. Right away, I knew what it was. Right away, I knew in that moment that God was whispering that he wanted his name to be known in the midst of this situation. That he wanted his goodness to be known in the midst of this. That our pressing in this moment is actually about his goodness flowing through us. Not that Vital Point would be known, but that he would be known. Now, the only reason why I was able to say those words to him was because when it all went down, I spent a few moments at my desk in my office with my face in my hands, pausing and praying for God's plan to unfold for us. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not some sort of spiritual giant. Sometimes I miss these moments completely. But for whatever reason, I found myself sitting at my desk with my face in my hands. See, I wonder if when we face these interruptions, we're too quick to react in different ways. We shake our fists, we get angry, and there's sometimes a place for those things, but I believe that in order for us to pray, it sets our minds in the right direction, and maybe it's about even the protection of our minds. The praying to God is the surrenderedness to God that his plan would unfold in the midst of the particular interruption that we face. Listen, there is a place for praying for our needs. There is a place to pray for our concerns. There's a place to pray the laundry list of prayers. There really is. And we petition God for these things. But there also is those moments and times where prayer is the posture of surrendering to the plan of God and that his plan would unfold in the midst of the interruption that we're facing. It's the protection of our minds. Because I don't know about you, but there's moments and times when I need my mind protected because I can begin fabricating stories and coming up with ideas, and I can get discouraged, and I can let the root of those things get into my mind and into my head. And so I want to make sure that I want to protect. So Paul and Silas, they go into this moment and they actually begin to pray. But they also, it says that they not only prayed, but they actually also sang hymns to God. They praised God. So there's this unfolding mechanism for us to understand in the resilient life of the big picture is that oftentimes when we push the pause button to pray, it can lead us to praise. Now, let me be clear on this. Praise is not necessarily the same thing as worship. There's a bit of a difference between the two things. Worship is a way in which we live our lives in awe of God. That figuratively speaking, that we are on our knees before God in awe of who he is and the wonder and the power of who he is. Worship is a way of life in which we live. Praise can be confused with worship, but worship is more of the usage of our words through thanksgiving, through gratitude, through expression, through joyful expression that we give back to God. And it's not in order to stroke his ego, it is so that we can remind ourselves who he is in the midst of our interruption. Praise has the ability to protect our hearts. See, when we face interruptions, it's not necessarily about digging our heads in the sand and ignoring the pain, ignoring the hurt. I don't think there's a place that you could ever find in the Christian faith where it would say that you are just to ignore all your problems and they're just going to go away. No, I don't believe that. I believe there's a place and a time for us to feel the grief, to feel the pain, to feel the hurt. But where it gets tricky is when we allow those things in the midst of our interruption to take root in our heart, where anger and bitterness and unforgiveness begin to grow. When bitterness and anger and unforgiveness begins to grow in our hearts, it creates distance within ourselves, distance within other people, and distance with God. When we take time to praise, it protects our hearts from those things entering in. When the CTV London reporter asked me on camera, and I wish he would have showed it at the CTV London thing, when he said to me, "How do you feel about the person that stole your trailer?" I feel fine. I forgive the guy. And he kind of looked at me behind the camera, and I said, "I don't want to be chained to that guy who stole our trailer. I'm going to forgive him. God's going to have to deal with him. I don't have to. He's going to answer before God, not me. Have fun with that." Maybe I shouldn't have said that. It's okay. I'm so glad I have you guys in the front row help me out this morning. It's so wonderful. See, I think that's what often we need, is just that place. Like yesterday afternoon, total transparency with you. I was exhausted yesterday afternoon. I hadn't had time to work on my message for today and consumed with all the things. And this isn't a woe is me by any stretch, but I just literally was emotionally and physically exhausted. And our youngest son, who's part of our church, and he's part of our London site, he sent us a song that's can be used in Sunday morning gatherings like we do. And the song was so powerful, and I put it on my home system. And you need to know that my home system can probably blow the roof off my house, which is awesome. And I set that song up, and I turned it so loud, and I laid on the floor in front of the subwoofer and just let that song wash over me. Reached out to a few friends, a few men that I trust, and I'm not doing well. I need you to pray for me. And I went into this moment of praise. Now, it's interesting because you might be like, Ron, I don't know what this praise thing is. I don't know what this, I can't even sing a tune. I'm terrible at singing. That's not the point. The point is the expression of our words that we give back to God for who he is, to shape our perspective of him in the midst of our interruption, to protect our hearts. There's this psalm, there's these writings in the Old Testament called the Psalms, and there's this one psalm that's been running around inside my head and heart. It's Psalm 34. It says, "I will praise the Lord." It's not going to come on the screen. "I will praise the Lord at all times. I will constantly speak his praises. I will boast only in the Lord. Let all who are helpless take heart. Come, let us tell of the Lord's greatness. Let us exalt his name forever." That is the power of what praise can do, is the lifting up of his name in the midst of what we face. See, pausing to pray can lead to moments of praise. And when these two things come together, there's a surrender to the plan of God in the midst of it, which we may not fully know or understand in the time, but I believe that over time it does begin to unfold for us. Paul and Silas were praying and praising. Look what happened. This is so good. It says, suddenly there was a massive earthquake, and the prison was shaken to its foundations. All the doors immediately flew open, and the chains of every prisoner fell off. This moment that they took in the midst of their interruption to understand that God was doing something bigger than them led them to the place of experiencing the chains falling off, but not only off of themselves, but off of the prisoners that were watching. I want you to think about this for a minute. I have this overwhelming sense that what is taking shape right now for us has nothing to do with our surviving this moment, but has everything to do with the mission of our church. That we are a church about reaching people who are shackled in their shame, that are shackled in their fear and in their brokenness and in their guilt and in their past. And for us as a church to rise up in the midst of it so that we may not be chained, but so that others might find freedom in the midst of their chained moments. That the chains can fall off. And I believe that we're going to hear stories in the future of people who were aware of what had happened, whether it's through the 700 shares of the Facebook posts of this story, or whether it's people watching this morning for the very first time on Facebook Live. We've got a lot of people watching today, which is awesome. But I believe that we are going to hear the stories of more and more people finding hope and finding healing and finding reconciliation in relationships and in marriages and in families as a result of us and because of what God is telling through us. Listen, Thursday morning, I was making my Americano for breakfast or for my coffee in the morning, and my grinder, and then I pressed the coffee down and I hooked it all up, and I pressed that button. I watched the goodness flow through it. I was like, and then I put the hot water in it, and I went and sat down with my Bible and my journal, and I just spent some time drinking my coffee, and all of a sudden, this word came to me. And is that we're being pressed in this moment so that His goodness can be known. Because whether or not we get our gear back, which is likely we're not, OPP are working hard on it, that His goodness is always good no matter what. And that His goodness can flow through us to others. I've been reminding the staff of our church that they need to be listening to the whispers of God as well in the midst of all this. And it's been a beautiful journey watching each of them express what God is teaching them through this. Our children's director, Tiff, she works so hard with her team to make sure that the kids' area is just right every single day, every single Sunday. And the other night, she was starting to go into that place of, I worked so hard for 2 years to get that just right. And then all of a sudden, the whisper was, yeah, but it's about the hearts of the children. It's not about the stuff. Those are the moments that define us as a church. Those are the moments that bring about the goodness of what we're facing. I don't know what you're facing right now. I don't know what you even believe in God right now. But this I do know, that you can become resilient when you step back, push the pause button and pray. Find that space to praise so that you can begin to become in tune with the plan of God in the moment that you're facing. It's not easy, I know. It's tough, but it is possible. We're going to close with this song. And it's a pretty powerful song of truth that the team's going to do for us. And just let it wash over you. And I'll come up and close when they're done. Listen to this song.